It's good to see all of you here today. Before talking about the ceasefire with Iran, I have a quick update from the First Lady of the United States. Yesterday marked the first conviction under the Take It Down law, a historic piece of legislation in which First Lady Melania Trump played a key role in its passage. Protecting victims of AI-generated sexually explicit images without consent, online harassment, and threats of violence. This is a great achievement for the First Lady, and I know the President is very proud of his wife's efforts to pass this crucial legislation that protects American youth. Therefore, we thank the First Lady for her efforts and hope that others will also report on this historic conviction from yesterday. Regarding the 2-week ceasefire announced by President Trump last night, this is a victory for the United States of America that the President and our incredible military made possible. Since the beginning of Operation Epic Fury, President Trump stated that this would be a 4 to 6 week military operation to dismantle the military threat posed by the radical Islamic Iranian regime. Thanks to the unbelievable capabilities of American service members, the United States achieved and surpassed these central military objectives in just 38 days. The armed forces of Zaramiyar destroyed Iran's defense industrial base, crushing the regime's ability to manufacture weapons that they and their allies used to maim and kill Americans and terrorize the world. Iran's ability to build and stockpile ballistic missiles and long-range drones has also been set back by years compared to what it was 6 weeks ago, before the start of Operation Epic Fury. We destroyed most of Iran's ballistic missiles, launchers, and long-range attack drones in more than 450 strikes, and about 800 strikes on Iran's drone launch units and storage facilities. In total, more than 13,000 targets across Iran were hit. Again, all of this happened in just 38 days. Meanwhile, the Iranian Navy was completely annihilated. The United States destroyed more than 150 naval vessels in total, including 16 entire classes of Iranian warships. Although it once had the largest submarine force in the Middle East, Iran now has no submarines. 97% of what was once Iran's huge stockpile of over 5,000 naval mines was also targeted and destroyed. Iran's air force is functionally and operationally irrelevant at this point, after the United States maintained total air dominance over the country for several weeks in a row. To highlight the importance of this, before Operation Epic Fury, the Iranian Air Force used to fly between 30 and 100 flights per day. Today, that number is 0. Iran's ability to finance and support its terrorist proxies has been significantly reduced. At this moment, Iran can no longer distribute weapons to its proxies in the region, and more importantly, Iran will not be able to acquire nuclear weapons. Before this successful operation, Iran was aggressively expanding its arsenal of short-range ballistic missiles. With these weapons and its navy, it was attempting a military buildup around its country to create an imminent and existential threat to United States military assets in the Middle East, to allies, and ultimately, to the free world. Iran was following this dangerous and aggressive strategy for one reason: to hold the world hostage to its terrorist ambitions. The Iranians intend to use their expanded capabilities as a shield to achieve their ultimate goal: building nuclear bombs domestically. But their murderous and evil plans were destroyed along with their army, nuclear program, and most of their leadership, including the former Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Their command and control structures were destabilized after being hit more than 2,000 times. Many remaining leaders are paralyzed by fear and no longer enjoy the freedom to move around the country or gather openly. Thanks to the unparalleled excellence of our warriors under the direction of the Commander-in-Chief, the world has just witnessed a historically swift and successful military triumph. President Trump initiated Operation Epic Fury with strategic military objectives, and the United States has clearly achieved them. As we celebrate this progress, we also remember and honor the 13 American heroes who gave their lives in this noble effort. I know that President Trump and the entire nation honor their supreme sacrifice, and we will never forget them. May God bless their families. The brave efforts of all our incredible members of the armed forces created the greatest leverage for the President of the United States, allowing him and his leadership team to engage in tough negotiations in recent weeks, which have now paved the way for a different diplomatic solution and lasting peace in the Middle East. The president's maximum pressure and the leverage created by the success of Operation Epic Fury led the Iranian regime to request and ultimately agree to a ceasefire proposal with the United States. Iran could no longer tolerate being bombed or risk what might happen after the 8 p.m. deadline set by President Trump last night. Iran agreed to open the Strait of Hormuz and, as the president said, we received a proposal from the Iranians that was considered a viable basis for negotiations. I saw a lot of inaccurate media coverage today about these negotiations and these plans. So let me be clear and set the record straight. The Iranians originally presented a 10-point plan that was fundamentally unserious, unacceptable, and completely dismissed. It was literally thrown in the trash by President Trump and his negotiating team. Many outlets in this room falsely reported that it would be acceptable to the United States, and that is false. With the president's deadline approaching quickly and the United States military completely decimating Iran with every passing hour, the regime acknowledged reality to the negotiating team. They presented a more reasonable plan, completely different and condensed, to the president and his team. President Trump and the team determined that the new modified plan was a viable basis for negotiation and aligned it with our own 15-point proposal. The president's red lines, that is, the end of Iranian re-enrichment in Iran, did not change, and the result. The idea that President Trump would ever accept an Iranian wish list as an agreement is completely absurd. The president will only make a deal that benefits the United States. And he and his negotiating team will focus on that effort over the next 2 weeks, as long as the Strait of Hormuz remains open without limitations or delays. These negotiations, extraordinary as they are, will be extraordinarily sensitive and complex and will take place behind closed doors over the next 2 weeks. I would strongly advise the media not to spread narratives that have no basis in facts. What Iran says publicly or passes on to all of you in the press is very different from what they communicate to the United States, to the president, and to his team in private. Never underestimate President Trump's ability to successfully advance America's interests and broker peace. President Trump has a proven track record of making good deals on behalf of the United States and the American people, and he will only accept one that puts America first. That being said, I will answer your questions. I know you have many today. With us is Shane Harris from AMAC Newsline. Shane, thank you for coming. Would you like to start?
Yes, thank you for having me, Caroline. I have 2 questions. After the ceasefire announcement, if this is the end of hostilities in Iran, what is the president's message to the American people about what was achieved for the country with Operation Epic Fury?
I think I already addressed a significant part of that in my opening remarks. 6 weeks ago, the president looked directly into the eyes of the American people and said he launched this operation to eliminate the imminent threat posed by Iran. And that threat has now been largely destroyed. Their navy, their missiles, their defense industrial base, and their plan to build a nuclear bomb will no longer be tolerated thanks to the remarkable success of Operation Epic Fury over the past 38 days. This has absolutely been achieved, and now we are entering the next phase of negotiations to define some important details. And who knows, maybe to broker a deal that brings lasting peace to the Middle East.
And secondly, what is the president's message to American seniors who vote more and could be decisive in the upcoming midterm elections?
Well, the president loves our seniors all across the country. And as you know, the president signed the Working Families Tax Cut last year, which greatly reduced taxes on Social Security for our seniors. With the Working Families Tax Cut, almost 90% of seniors won't pay taxes on Social Security. A big win for seniors, the middle class, and working families. 0 tax on tips and overtime. Next week is the income tax deadline. You will hear from the president about how his policies have benefited the people, and I am proud to announce that he will be traveling next week to the states of Nevada and Arizona to highlight this historic achievement throughout the week. Thank you for being here, Shane. Gabe.
Iran's state media says that Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz today in response to Israeli attacks on Lebanon. What is the White House's response to this? And you just listed many military successes, I understand that. But strategically, how does the government argue that Iran doesn't have more economic influence now than it did before the beginning of?
Regarding the first report broadcast by the Iranian state media, the president was informed before I took the podium. This is unacceptable, and once again, what they say publicly differs from what they say in private. We saw an increase in traffic in the Strait today, and I reiterate the president's demand that the Strait of Hormuz be reopened immediately and safely. That is his expectation, and it has already been said privately that this is what should happen and that these public reports are false.
Caroline, the president threatened yesterday the end of a civilization if a ceasefire agreement does not happen. Given that Iranian leaders have previously said death to America, why would it be appropriate for the President of the United States to use that kind of language when talking about civilian targets? And was the president mocking Islam by ending his post on Truth Social over the weekend with praise be to Allah? Wouldn't that antagonize Muslim allies around the world?
I understand questions about the president's rhetoric, but what matters most to him are the results. And in fact, his very tough rhetoric and his firm negotiation style are what led to the outcome that you are all witnessing today. Iran publicly acknowledged last night that it wanted this ceasefire with the United States because it could no longer tolerate the bombings from our powerful and lethal armed forces, committing to the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, for which the president will hold them accountable and which the government is closely monitoring in real time.
First, shouldn't the world take their words seriously?
The world should respect and listen to their words, understanding that the president is always more interested in results, and it was the Iranians who backed down, not President Trump. He said they would face severe consequences, as you described, by the 8 p.m. deadline if they didn't reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And what did they do last night? They agreed to reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
President Trump would like to see Lebanon in this peace agreement because Israeli attacks on Lebanon increased today, leaving dozens of victims.
Of course, Lebanon is not part of the ceasefire. This was communicated to everyone involved. Prime Minister Netanyahu declared yesterday his support for the ceasefire and for the efforts of the United States, and assured the president that they will continue as helpful partners over the next 2 weeks.
Is there any possibility, however, that the president might want to see Lebanon included at a future date, since it seems to be causing or potentially undermining the Lebanon ceasefire?
Again, I'm sure this will continue to be discussed between Prime Minister Netanyahu, the United States, Israel, and everyone involved, but for now, they are not part of the ceasefire agreement. Jeff?
Thank you.
Caroline, will the United States participate in negotiations with Iran in Islamabad on Friday?
I can announce that the president will send his negotiating team, led by Vice President J.D. Vance, Special Envoy Witkoff, and Mr. Kushner, to Islamabad this weekend. The first round will take place on Saturday morning local time, and we are looking forward to these in-person meetings.
And what role does the president see for the Himaywa in monitoring and assisting the Strait of Hormuz going forward?
The president commented on this earlier today. We will continue to monitor very closely. We will help in any way we can, but we expect Iran to do this, and the president made that very clear. As his statement yesterday says, the ceasefire depends on the safe reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. That was decided last night. Tonight, we know it takes time, but the president expects and will demand this from everyone. Of course, with the green blazer.
Thank you very much.
Of course, and then in front of you. But Andrew, go ahead. You're not wearing green.
This is a classic and very well-tailored blazer.
So, regarding the president's rhetoric, when the United States invaded Iraq in 2003, George W. Bush said in a message to the Iraqi people that the military campaign was aimed at the lawless men who govern your country and not at you. Yesterday, the president threatened to destroy the entire civilization of Iran, not just the Iranian government, but the Iranian civilization and the Iranian people. The United States has been a moral leader for most of its history by waging wars against other governments, not against civilizations. How can the president claim that America can ever have moral superiority if he is threatening to destroy civilizations and not presenting wars as fights against other governments?
Andrew, I think you should look at the actions of this president over the past 6 weeks and the actions of our brave men and women of the United States Armed Forces who have essentially eliminated the army of an outlaw Islamic regime that has been shouting death to America for 47 years and has killed and maimed thousands of American soldiers over the past 5 decades. The president undoubtedly has moral superiority over the Iranian terrorist regime, and to suggest otherwise is frankly an insult.
With all due respect, no. With all due respect.
Go ahead.
Well, considering what we've seen today in Lebanon and the increase in attacks from Israel, is there any concern that Netanyahu is trying to end the ceasefire?
The president spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu last night, and in that private conversation, Netanyahu publicly reiterated his support for the president and that Israel remains a key ally and partner of the United States. They have been extraordinary partners over the past 6 weeks, and we are grateful for their heroic efforts. The president had that conversation last night, and it was made public to the world.
Just to follow up,
Go ahead, thank you.
Caroline, I have a question for you about Iran and also a question about the Dignity Act, of course. About Iran, it is said that the ceasefire happened after the intervention of 2 unlikely factors, J.D. Vance and China. What role did these parties play in closing the deal?
Vice President Vance played a very significant role in this from the beginning. He is, of course, the president's right-hand man. He is the vice president of the United States. He has participated in all the discussions and will now lead this new phase of the negotiations. In Islamabad later this week regarding China, there were talks that took place between the highest levels of our government and the government of China. The president has great respect for President Xi. Thank you. In working with him and with that country, he is looking forward to visiting China in just a few weeks.
And about the Dignity Act, it is gaining momentum in Congress and would benefit some illegal immigrants in the country, providing a path to citizenship. What is the White House's stance on this bill, and would the president sign it if it reached him?
Honestly, I haven't spoken with the president about the legislation. I will talk to him and we will give our formal position on the matter as soon as possible. You're welcome. Go ahead.
The president suggested in an interview today that he would support a joint action between the U.S. and Iran to charge tolls on ships in the Strait. Does he believe that the U.S. should profit from the Strait of Hormuz?
It's an idea that the president suggested, as you know, and that will be discussed over the next 2 weeks. But the president's immediate priority is the reopening of the strait without limitations, whether by tolls or in any other way.
And regarding highly enriched uranium, has Iran given the government any indication that it would simply hand over the enriched uranium? Or does the president expect that he would have to send ground troops to achieve this?
This is at the top of the list of priorities for the president and his negotiating team as they prepare for the next round of talks. And as I said, this is a red line that the president will not back down from, and he is committed to making sure this happens. Well, we hope it will be through diplomacy.
But did they give any indication that they would turn this around? They did. They did? Yes.
Sarah Trevor.
News from Iran indicates that air defenses were activated in several cities and explosions were heard in Isfahan. Who is bombing Iran at this very moment?
Are those reports from a few minutes ago? Yes. Okay. So, obviously I'll have to go back and check with the national security team. I'll take care of this now and get an answer for you.
Going back to the question about civilization we discussed.
Again, I haven't seen those reports and I'm not checking them. It's not out of distrust, Trevor, but I want to check with the experts. I would just say, and I repeat to Vice President this morning, this is a fragile truce. Ceasefires are naturally fragile. We saw this in relation to the 12-day war between Iran and Israel last year. Sometimes it takes time for these ceasefires to be fully implemented. And one of the results of Operation Epic Fury was that we completely dismantled Iran's command and control center, which makes it difficult for them to transmit messages along the chain. So we understand that. I would ask for a little patience, but of course we want to see the ceasefire implemented and respected by all parties as soon as possible.
Thank you. And what about the Americans? Presidential administrations since Ronald Reagan have expressed the idea that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. Is that still this administration's view, given the president's remarks about civilization?
Our position on this policy hasn't changed, Heidi. Carol,
Carol, thank you, Carol. Considering the seriousness of what he said yesterday, what is your understanding of what he meant when he said civilization will be eliminated?
I think it was a very, very strong threat from the President of the United States, which made the Iranian regime give in, to call for a ceasefire and to agree to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. It was a very strong threat which brought results, and as the Secretary of War stated at the Pentagon this morning, it was not an empty threat. The Pentagon had a list of targets ready by 8 p.m. yesterday in case the Iranian regime did not agree to open the strait. What did they do? And we should be grateful. Thank you for that.
I take it as a moral guide in the world, given that
Your colleague Andrew asked that same question before, and I repeat it. Any insinuation in this room that Iran has moral superiority over the United States is an insult, considering the atrocities they have committed, right? Considering the atrocities they have committed against our people and our armed forces over the past 5 decades. John? John, you may proceed.
Thank you. Very expensive, Lenga. I have 2 questions for you. One of them is about the joint statement released earlier today by the European allies of the United States and NATO. And in that joint statement, they talked about the Strait of Hormuz. Our governments will contribute to ensuring freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. What is the government's reaction to this joint statement? Does this ease things when the President meets with the NATO Secretary General a little later this afternoon?
I have a quote from the President of the United States about NATO to share with you. They were tested and they failed. It's sad that NATO has turned its back on the American people over the past 6 weeks, since it's the American people who fund their defense. As you know, President Trump will meet with Secretary Ruth in a few hours here at the White House, and I know he's looking forward to having a very frank and open conversation with him.
And secondly, regarding this conflict, as you pointed out, President Trump said there was a regime change after 38 days. Did this regime change bring more freedoms to the Iranian people?
I think that's a question that's being asked a little too soon, John, and we hope that's the case, but it's something that's yet to come.
Ms. Carolyn.
Amen.
Carolyn, regarding the Iranian toll collection in the Strait of Hormuz, I heard you mention several red lines set by the president, but I didn't hear you say that charging this toll in the strait is a red line. Would it be acceptable to the United States in the end if the Iranians managed to collect tolls in the Strait of Hormuz?
I think the president was very clear and straightforward in his language last night in his post on Truth Social, where he said that this ceasefire is subject to the free, safe, and immediate reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. That is very clear language and should be interpreted literally.
That is
Free. Carrie, go ahead. Yes, without restrictions, including tolls. Yes, Carrie.
There is a brief update on the toll collection. Why would the U.S. allow Iran to charge a toll for the Strait of Hormuz? This is something we have opposed for several years.
I repeat, it's not that we've said we've definitely accepted it. The partnership was a proposal from the president, but he stated last night that he wants to see the strait reopened immediately, without restrictions, and that's exactly what we will demand from them. All right, yes, that's it. And a second question.
I have family and friends in Iran. I myself am Iranian, and I have been talking to them during the blackout. Yesterday, one of my relatives said goodbye to me. So, what message should we give to the Iranians who ask me what to do now and how to stay safe because they really don't know what to do?
I think the president's priority and mine as his spokesperson is to make sure that clear messages are sent to the American people, which is my job today. Regarding the Iranian people, the president eliminated the imminent threat posed by their military to the United States, our allies, and our forces in the region. And of course, as the president has said for a long time, he hopes that Iran will be a country of peace and prosperity. We are entering this round of negotiations to try to reach an agreement with this new regime that will bring long-term stability to the Middle East.
Wait, but he said they should stay inside their homes and also take back their country. So there's a contradiction there, right? So how do you address that?
We are entering the next round of negotiations with the remnants of the regime and those we are talking to, aiming for long-term peace for the entire region, including the Iranians as well. Caroline, in blue you may speak. Yes.
Thank you, Caroline. The White House issued this statement from the Iranian government that passage through the strait will be coordinated with Iran's armed forces. As of today, who controls the Strait of Hormuz?
Again, these statements came out 12 hours ago. We expect the strait to be opened immediately. As I said before, we've seen an increase in traffic in the strait, and it's something we're constantly monitoring as the days go by. One more question. Who controls the strait now?
There's one about the deportations of Iranian officials and then about the negotiations, but there are security concerns about Vice President Vance. In the peace negotiations, Stacey Whitcomb, Jared Kushner, about the deportation of General Soleimani's niece. The Trump administration plans to deport her.
Or relatives or family members of Iranian officials who are in the United States.
Certainly anyone who is here fraudulently. I understand that one of those whose visa was revoked by Secretary Rubio and who was deported by ICE applied for asylum fraudulently. That is against the laws of the United States. Anyone here illegally or fraudulently is subject to our immigration laws and will be removed. I know that this is a top priority for the State Department working with the Department of Homeland Security. As for the Vice President's security, we trust the United States Secret Service in their work to keep the Vice President and the negotiation team safe. They do a tremendous job and we trust them for that. Caroline, in the back, you may speak.
Thank you, Caroline. The President said Cuba is next. What is the message to Americans about Cuba, and what can Cubans expect from this?
When President Trump said that and clarified after that statement, what he meant was that the Cuban regime is doomed to fall. Their country is very weak. They are in a very fragile economic position, obviously, from a financial point of view. The Cuban people are fed up with their government, and rightfully so. And those conversations and discussions are still happening at the highest levels of our government. I don't have any updates or announcements for you today regarding our policy toward Cuba. Caroline, hello.
Thank you, Caroline. Secretary Hegseth stated this morning that American troops will remain in the region. What should we expect from American troops in the theater of operations over the next 2 weeks and beyond?
For specific information about resources in the Middle East, please consult the Pentagon. Consider what the Secretary said and what the President personally reiterated, that we will not move anything immediately. This is a 2-week ceasefire, and we believe that in the end, it will result in a good agreement between the United States and Iran. But we will make sure that our armed forces always remain ready. Commander-in-Chief, I'll want a few more in the back. Of course, thank you, but nothing. I'll answer.
Thank you. About NATO, do you know if the United States is still considering withdrawing? Is that still a real possibility?
It's something the President has already discussed and will address in a few hours with Secretary General Rutte, and maybe you'll hear directly from him after that meeting later this afternoon. Thank you all.